Hello everybody, pro gamer +8 Okay. No there. But hello, how's it going? How you doing? We're trying to start up Unreal Editor, but it's not starting up. It should be starting. Running. It says it's running, but what do I do? Okay, now it's starting. Let's go. Pop out chat. Pop out chat. Do I have a ball shot? I thought I had a ball shot just quickly, but I did not. Okay. Okay. Inlight. Inlight. Sometime it will stop and we'll be victorious. We are waiting for okay, Fortnite. Okay, cool, that's there. Turn that off. And that off. And that off. Pro gamer, Madison bot is here. Sorry, we're just waiting 83% more for Unreal Engine to start and we can start making maps. So yeah, you have to look at my big face for a little bit longer. How are you guys doing today? Having a good day? F1 map, yes, that's what we're creating. Might not look so good, but I'm gonna try our best to make it. I don't know if we're gonna make it today, the whole thing today. We can even make it today. Try. Ooh, it started. Unreal Edit is creative. It enables content creators, in these cases, creators to create, develop, modify, and age requirements. You must be the legal age of. Yeah. How is it? Alright. Okay. Accept. Okay, I don't. Oh, it has started. Okay, guys. We're loud. My mouse is good, ain't it? Okay, game capture, Unreal Editor. Bada boom, bada bing. Okay, I might just like after like 10 minutes of trying this, I might be like, what the hell? You guys see this? What? What just? Why is it showing just? Okay. Shit. First. Alright, let's see. Your first hour and let's do the like. Alright, wait, just do, let me just do display capture. Abdul, are you gonna make a game? Yes, I am. What's up, Hildinger? How's it going? It has been a while. I've just... Ew, not Minecraft. We're so happy. Okay, we're gonna try and find out. Okay, introduction. Let's see. Your first hour. We're gonna...
Hello, my name is Matthew.
I don't know if anyone wants to watch,
Welcome.
but I'm gonna be doing the tutorial so we know exactly what we're gonna do. And you guys are gonna know too.
The
Then we'll
course
be
for
making
your
some
first
maps.
hour in UEFN. We're going to take a look at UEFN from a high-level view and touch upon a lot of the different parts and what makes UEFN unique over just Fortnite Creative. We're going to look at the different parts of the
I mean,
editor.
I was playing squads, but you left. Like I was playing squads like 10 minutes after you left. When I said, so I mean, no, I did not add you.
Including starting your own project, how to work with content, both included as well as your own custom content, and then play testing that content inside of Fortnite.
I mean, I know the basics,
Look at
but
some of the custom UEFN systems
might
available
as well
to you,
get
such
the
as creating your own landscapes or your own models, using
the
materials
proper
to create
guide.
those models and landscapes, using the Niagara effects system to create your own particle effects, adding in custom lighting and post-processing effects to alter the look of your experience,
Look
and
at
then using
this.
Sequencer to animate items, such as turning on and off different effects or creating your own animation for your characters. UEFN is designed to create your experiences for Fortnite. That means
Let's
every
go.
experience you create is published to the platform, and it lets you reach that built-in audience of millions. Let's go ahead and get started by looking at the editor, which is the UE part of UEFN.
Alright, let's see that editor. Why are you saying?
After we've
I'm not
launched
Judean.
UEFN
Alright, let's see
and we've
this.
gotten to the project browser, we can go ahead and start working
Let's see
with
this.
creating a project or bringing in a project from Creative and looking at the editor. As we can see here in my projects, I have no custom created UEFN projects. I have some islands in here. Each of these islands, we can see on the top right corner, have an icon. That icon indicates it's a creative island. And if we wanted to, we could choose one of our islands. For example, my
What is this? Design a car racing game copy.
island copy, and we could create a version of it for use in UEFN. You could choose the project location, browse to where you want to put it at, and then rename it. You'll also notice there's an error here. Project names cannot contain characters such as, well, that's a blank or a space.
You gotta try.
So if I wanted to, I'd have to rename this. And now I could convert this into a UEFN
Din,
island.
what's up? How's it going? How you doing?
Opening up your existing projects, we can
What
go
are
into
you
island
doing?
templates. And here we have some pre-built island templates. You'll find the majority of the pre-built islands in Creative, as well as an empty level, and a simple and a blank map to get started with. Lastly, on the left, we have feature examples. This is where you will find some example templates that you can open up and use for learning purposes. These will be updated as time goes on, and we will be looking at some of these in a later module. In addition, if we go back to the My Projects, we have a drop-down, and this drop-down will let you change between the different teams you may be a part of, so you can see the projects that are part of those teams. So let's go ahead and get started with one of the island templates. So we'll go to the island templates. I'm going to create blank, so that way we have something basic to start with. I'm going to go ahead and create it in my folder. Let's go ahead and name this your first hour. I'm going to go ahead and click create. After a little bit,
this guy's giving out his name.
Our first hour project. Now you might be wondering to yourself, hey, mine doesn't look exactly like that. Why? Well, this is a good first lesson. As you're working with the editor, you have the ability to move windows, drag windows, close windows. And if you ever get stuck or lost, we can go up to Window.
I'm doing good. I'm
layout,
super excited to make my own full F1 map and then publish it and make
editor layout, and we can continue from here. We're going to take a brief look at the different windows available to us. Starting at the top, we have our menu.
And it's a Saturday, so
we have our normal
it's a good day.
Edit and window menu, which you might find in most pieces of software.
Yeah.
File is particularly useful.
No, I don't have a Mac.
Where we can open up levels, save levels, as well as create a new project. Also, if you didn't create a new project using one of your existing islands,
F1 map, no.
Map.
Map.
It'll show you the islands that you have available, and this will create a new level or a map inside of your project, rather than creating a whole new project with that island.
that design a race car will also be good
preferences.
for what I want to
Window
do.
gives us access to our different windows.
I need to make it
This is
smooth.
useful if you've closed one on accident and you want to reopen it. Tools are some common tools that we're going to use, such as your project size and if you had revision control turned on. The verse menu is where we can explore our verse code as well as build it and open it in Visual Studio
It's
Code.
Sunday for me. That is a whole new day.
We may need to in our project. The select menu is a quick and easy way to select items, not only by, for example, all, but maybe you want just the lights or stacked meshes. And lastly, we have our help menu, which is a useful way to get access to the documentation as well as any other help available to you. Below this, we have our toolbar. We have a quick shortcut for saving the current level. The
very far.
Mode, it allows us to choose the different modes available to us, such as landscape, modeling, and animation. The project drop-down. This is where we can manage some project-specific things, as well as our team information. The create menu shortcut. This is where we can easily create actors and put them into our level, such as lights or basic shapes, as well as get access to the Fab Marketplace. This is our first button. Clicking on this will open the current project in Visual Studio Code. Launch session is our button to quickly launch into our current playtest session. Next to it are 3 dots where we have quick options. On the far right, we have our Teams menu if we're connected to a session, as well as our Settings menu where we can change some common settings. One of the important ones is our scalability. If you're using this on a machine that maybe doesn't have enough power for your project, you can adjust it to a lower quality inside of the editor.
I'll probably do that.
Below this, we have our viewport. This is our view into the world. Standard navigation inside the viewport uses normal first-person controls. We can hold down the right mouse button and move our mouse, and it will now rotate our view in a stationary point. Holding down the left mouse button and moving will allow us to go
3 Lambos for Fortnite.
like we are walking.
Yeah.
If we hold down the right mouse
maybe
button,
in the game we will have Fortnite
WASD keys
too.
We can move
Lambos as the cars.
Holding down the right mouse button and using
I want to like create like actually the F1 cars in Fortnite and make it hopefully as fast.
Of our world, let's say our player spawn pad here, it will give us a widget or a gizmo that allows us to move it in the world by default. By clicking on any one of our arrows, we can drag when we hold down the
I hope it doesn't get copyrighted because, I mean, although it's F1 related, it's not going to be.
By clicking on multiple arrows at the same time. By using the viewport toolbar, we have a quick access menu on the top left where we can turn on and off things like frames per second and different interactive modes. The next one changes the way we are looking at our current view. By default, it's perspective. We have our different orthographic views such as top, bottom, left, and right. For example, this is our right view. I'm going to go back to perspective mode. Next to this is the type of view mode. By default, it's lit. We have options such as unlit, wireframe,
portion one,
different detail modes. Next to this, you have the ability to turn on.
That no one will see. Will notice the difference.
Such as I don't want to see decals. I can enable or disable them. Maybe the atmosphere is causing a current issue and I need to debug something. Next to this is our time of day preview. It's a slider where we can drag back and forth to change the current time of the day from 0 to 24. That is only enabled if you're using the Fortnite time of day setup, which I'll show you how to change later. To right of this, we have our project size preview. We'll have to cook this first in order to actually view any information. Our quick shortcuts for selecting objects, translating objects, rotating objects, and scaling them. You can also see at the end they all had hotkeys, Q, W, E, and R. For example, I have my item currently selected, and it's in the translate mode. If I wanted to rotate it, I can change to rotate mode.
Okay.
Using widgets, I can now rotate that object.
You're not Enderman. What are you then?
Local or world space translation.
Enderman.
If something is angled a certain way,
we're learning.
Change between the local and world space.
The Unreal Engine.
Surface snapping. Are we going to snap to surfaces and how far away? Next to this is our grid snapping. By default, if I go back into movement mode and I move this item, it's going to move smoothly.
Beginning.
If I was to turn on,
makes no sense.
Now it's going to snap in 32 units. Or if I was to adjust this, it would snap even bigger. Next to this is the snapping for rotation. I currently have it off, and you can see we can smoothly rotate. Turn it on, I can now snap our rotation to 90 degrees or any other value you like. Next to this is our scaling snapping, enabling it or disabling it, as well as the option for the snap amount.
So
Next to this is how fast our camera will
it's a
move.
lot
We can
at
see this is the
once,
speed
you
of our
know.
camera at 4. If I change this down to 1,
Can you guys
our camera
hear
will
him
now move much
talking
slower.
good,
If you
right?
have the right mouse button down and you're moving,
You guys can
scroll
hear
in and out with your
everything
mouse
good and like see
change the
everything that
speed
is happening.
relative to that value you have. Right now I'm at the max speed I can move
That's
for 1.
good.
If I was to adjust this to say something like 4, you
Okay.
see I'm moving much faster, but I can use the scroll wheel to scroll down, and I will
Wait,
now be
did you say
slower.
how you can move? Is it
And
just
lastly,
right
we have our
click or is
different
it?
viewport modes. Clicking on this will change us into 4 viewport mode, and we now have 4 distinctively different viewports we can adjust the settings on.
Or is it
Maybe I want this
WASD?
one to be unlit, and I still want it to be perspective mode. This one could be, for example,
Wait,
left,
what?
and it could
How did he change it to like 4 different scenes? I was.
viewport mode,
No.
and I will now be slower. And lastly, we have our different viewport
No.
modes. Clicking on this will change us into 4 viewport mode. And we now have
Okay.
4 distinctively different viewports we can adjust the settings on. Maybe I want this one to be
That would be
unlit,
very
but I still want it to be
handy to see
perspective mode. This
everything
one could
while
be, for
I'm
example,
doing.
left, and it could be in lighting mode. And you can change them as you need to.
That is
button
good.
again to go back. In the top left, you do have options for more layouts. In the top right, we have our outliner. Our outliner tells us all of the items that are inside of our world. So for example, we can see I have 3 grid planes, an island settings, 2 spawn pads, some world data layer information, as well as a level bounce item. And if I was to add
this is
something
gonna
new,
take
for
very
example,
hard to
create
like
menu and adding
even
a
like
point
do
light,
like anything in
dragging and
this.
dropping it in,
It'll take a
we
long
now see we have a
time,
point light.
but
All
it
the
will be worth
information
it.
for the items in our outliner are in our details panel below it. This is where we change things such as the light color and intensity on our light, or in the case of our player spawn pads, maybe which team it's going to be on.
Did he
The
show
world
how he
settings,
put on
if
a
we go to
light?
window, example, we can see I have 3 grid planes, an island settings, 2 spawn pads, some world data layer information, as well as a level bounce item. And if I was to add something new, for example, our create menu and adding a point light,
Yes,
dragging,
okay.
dropping it in,
Well,
we can
have
now
fun
see
with
we have our
that.
point light. All the information for the items in our outliner
Next time
are in
I
our
see
details
you.
panel below it. This is where we change things such
Okay,
as
I probably wouldn't have made the map by
or
then,
in the
but
case of our player spawn pads, maybe which
it will
team
be
it's
something.
going to be on. The world settings, if we go to window, world settings, can adjust the individual settings for the map we're currently on. The most important one in here is going to be whether we're using the time of day system. If we were to disable the time of day manager, you now see we have a blank map, and we no longer have the ability to change our time of day.
I don't need to do that.
And our last item is our content browser, which we actually can't see. If we click on content drawer in the bottom left, it's going to pop up. This is going to give us all of the assets inside of our project. For example, inside my first hour content folder, we can see our map and our game feature data. We also have access to the Fortnite folder. We can have props, galleries, and devices that come with Fortnite for use in our islands, as well as an Epic folder, which gives us some default materials and textures we might want to use. There is a hotkey. It's Control Spacebar if we want to hide or bring back our content drawer, or we can choose to dock it in the layout, and now the content browser will show up. You'll notice as I click and drag on any of the borders, we could
I think I'll just keep that up. You know,
we can also click, hold, and drag any of our panels and move them into different parts of our world. We can even dock them into our viewport and make new setups. And again, if you ever get lost, go ahead and go back and reset your layout.
Right.
We're going to go ahead and continue from here.
It's handy because sometimes I just mess around. Like this OBS, there's so much random stuff there. It's not the same.
And how we can use it.
Working. Hey, we are going through this. Working with content. I mean, I think I already know how to do this, so I might just like skip through it.
Your window or your panel.
Is anyone enjoying this, by the way? Is anyone here like wanting to do this, or is like stop with this? Get. Or I mean, it's not like it's gonna change my mind. I'm just wondering if anyone thinks this is interesting.
Editor. I'm gonna open up my content drawer from the bottom left and dock it into my layout. Now, right now we have one content browser. We could go up to Window, Content Browser. And we
no, you're bored.
Them open at one time. I can open up Content Browser 3, for example, drag it and dock it at the top, and I can set it to show me something else that I need to keep separate and available at all times. Now, going into our content browser, we can see on the left we have a folder.
Well, in an hour I'll be making something,
all
so
the items
you guys
that are inside of our project. We touched
Wanna
on the
come
fact that
back
we
in
have
an
our
hour?
first hour content folder
You're
here.
more than
This is where
welcome
all
to.
of our content is going to go for the project. And then we have a Fortnite folder with Fortnite content and an Epic folder with Epic content. The Fortnite and Epic folders are protected. You cannot modify anything in there. You just use it for your own purposes. Now, earlier I showed you how we could go into the create menu at the top, light, and then drag an item into our world. And you'll notice it's trying to stick to the floor or any other items that we're trying to drag it on top of. In addition to our create menu at the top, which is useful for quickly accessing things like maybe we want to create a cube to play with or any other basic items, we have our Fortnite folder in our content.
Does anyone
folder.
other than
We
Pro Gamer have an
some Fortnite
idea?
devices, props, and other items that come with Fortnite creative mode. For example, I can go into our props folder. I could go into maybe our Cyber City. And now we have access to some of the props used in our Cyber City set. I could click, hold, and drag any of these items out and drop them into my world.
Whoa. The whole...
Move them to where I want to let them be.
Hey, I'll see you in an hour if you want to watch me actually create or I'll see you later. Tomorrow I'll be playing with people.
You can do this with any of the items inside of our content browser. For Fortnite specifically, we also have some galleries available to us. If we go into our galleries folder and I go into, say, building, we have a bunch of smaller folders in here which contain the parts that make up our galleries. But if we scroll down, we can actually see larger items that are our entire gallery. And if we wanted to, we could drag a gallery in and get the entire gallery set. Or in the case of like our clock tower, we could find our clock tower, go into our clock tower gallery folder, and now we have the individual parts if we wanted to pull them in. Now at this point, I want to go and get rid of some of the items that I don't need anymore. So I can select them in our viewport and use the delete key, or we can right click, go to edit, and choose delete. I'm going to clean up the rest of the items I don't need. In this case, I have multiple items, and if I wanted to, I could delete them all one at a time, or I could go into my outliner, and I could select multiple items using the shift and the control keys.
Okay, yeah, that
or I can hold down the control and the alt key and make a box around the items I want to multi-select. Now in this case, I have the background selected, which I don't want to get rid of as well. So I can hold down control and unselect those. I just have the buildings and I can delete them. Now this item I want to keep.
God damn Jesse, man. He killed Gus. It was his fault that destroyed Gus's trust in Walter White.
So I can go to my scaling options.
And destroyed
middle, where it's all
himself.
Yellow, and I can drag with my mouse while I have the left mouse button down. And I can scale. And I'll be scaling at that 0.25 scaling option.
Yeah.
So we can see down here in the bottom right in our details panel. So that's how we can rescale items, or maybe I want it to be skinnier. In this case, I want the scaling snapping off, and maybe I'll just adjust the item so it looks. I want the scaling items, or maybe in our details panel, an option which we can see at that 0.25 scaling options. I can click in the middle where it's all yellow, and I can drag with my mouse while I have the left mouse button down, and I can scale.
Okay.
From Fortnite is they snap a certain way. Inside of our world settings, window, world settings, you have the editor self-snapping. If I was to have this enabled like it is by default, and I drag in one of my floors, you'll notice no matter where I drop it, it snaps. It's going to try to snap and keep itself in the default cells. I can disable editor cell snapping, and now it's going to respect my normal snapping that I've set up inside the editor itself. I'm going to delete these items since we don't actually want them, and we'll look at our next thing, which is going to be our Fab Marketplace. I want to go and set up a little Wild West scene for playing around with. Let's see if we have anything in the marketplace. We can go back into our content folder, right-click in the background, and we can go to Fab Marketplace. Or we could go to the Create menu, Fab Marketplace. Or the Window menu, Fab Marketplace.
Alright, see you later, Enderman.
So
I am indeed the boss.
But this is where we'll have access to both free and paid content. If I go back, I can find my Old West. I'm going to explore the Old West section. And let's say I want something like a wagon. I'm going to search for a wagon. And I found a wooden wagon that meets my needs. I could now click, hold the mouse, drag, and drop the wagon into my world. It's going to grab it, it's going to crate it and cook it for our project, and it's going to then show up inside of our project, which we can see here.
But if this works, I'll be the content creator map guy.
You can add it from here, or we can click on the
We'll be
dots,
making
and
maps
this is one of the assets that is free or we
for some
own.
of that's
We can
not
actually add these source files, so that way we could then edit if we wanted to. We can see here, we now have that content downloaded from the Fab Marketplace, and we can see it's inside of our project. That stuff will be saved in our reference content folder, so if we wanted more, we can then drag and drop them out. So this is good for content that exists inside of the editor, both Fortnite content as well as Unreal Engine content and our Fab Marketplace content. But what if we now wanted to bring in items that we created? Well, let's look at importing that content. Let's go back into our main folder. I'm going to create a new folder by right-clicking and choosing new folder. We'll call this one meshes. And this is where I'm going to import my items that I created. I created some hay bales. So let's make another folder called hay. And inside of here, we're going to import our meshes marketplace content. But what if we now wanted to bring in items that we created? Well, let's look at importing that content. Let's go back into our main folder. I'm going to create a new folder by right-clicking and choosing new folder. We'll call this one meshes. And this is where I'm going to import my items that I created. I created some hay bales. So let's make another folder called hay. And inside of here, we're going to import our hay. Now we have a few different ways of doing this. If we have a folder open in our File Explorer, we can drag and drop those items directly into our folder. Now in this case, I have a few different sets of hay here, and then I have some textures that make up that hay. I'm going to grab my first hay, drag it and drop it. It's going to ask me, what am I importing? We're going to use the default settings. This is a normal stack mesh. We don't need to change anything special, and we'll go ahead and hit import.
Okay.
Once I brought my mesh in, we now have access to that stack mesh. I can double click on it in the content browser to open up my stack mesh editor. It doesn't look correct because we haven't actually assigned any materials or the textures or the way it looks, but we have our stack mesh. In addition, it also created two materials. These were the materials that were used when we created this item in an external program.
This is so much things to learn about,
so I
but
can
we're
right-click
learning it.
and I can choose import. And inside my import folder now, I'll choose the rest of my hay bales by shift selecting them and hitting open. In this case, all of my hay bales, while they were different meshes, used all the same textures and materials. I'm going to tell it not to create the materials. We're just going to use the existing one, and we're going to import all. And we now have all of our different types of hay, 4 bales and 3 items on the ground. I can actually drag these in and drop them because they are stack meshes. And we can see that we have what looks like a puddle and what looks like a big fuzzy gray mess. Now that we have our meshes inside of here, we need the actual textures that we can use to set up our materials. So I'm going to use the add button at the top this time, go up to import. You'll see it's the same exact setup. I'll select multiple items again, all of my textures, and hit open. And you'll notice it didn't give me a pop-up box, but on the bottom right, it actually told me it was importing and gave me more information. Now, one thing to note at this point, all these items that I've brought in have a little asterisk or star icon in the bottom left. That means it's unsaved. It's a good idea to remember to save often, just in case you have a problem. Let's go to Save All. It's going to ask us to save our items. And now our items no longer have that indicator. They are unsaved. Now, materials will be covered in more details in a later part of this course. So I'm going to, off-screen, quickly set up our materials for these hay. And with that, I've now set up our materials.
Just did it without us even knowing.
Start stacking them by dragging and dropping them into my world. And with a little bit of effort, we can have a nice little setup. Now, one thing to do also is, if I put some items into my world and I want to duplicate them easily, I can hold down the Alt key on my keyboard, and drag will then duplicate that item out. And now we have a nice haystack. Now, there is another item I would like to bring in. It's inside of one of my other projects. Inside of Unreal Engine, I have this wheel prop that I want to pull into UEFN. I can select the item and find it inside of my content browser. And I'm going to go ahead and find this stack mesh water wheel. I can right-click, Asset Actions, Migrate. And it's going to ask me where I want to migrate this to. And the nice thing is when it migrates, it brings everything in as it was working inside of the editor, which means we don't have to worry about setting up our materials. It's going to come in working. Now, one thing to keep in mind is it needs to go inside of the content folder inside of your project. Inside of my project here, for my first hour, I have a plugins folder. Inside the plugins folder, I have a project name folder, your first hour. Inside of here, I have a content folder. This is the folder you want to export into. We'll select it, it'll save it. It'll export it out, and now I don't need this project anymore. Going back inside of my UEFN Your First Hour project, we now have a new folder called Northwood. That was the folder structure set up for the project I just pulled my wheel out of. Inside of there, we have all the other items, including under our meshes, our water wheel. And just like any other stack mesh, I can drag in my water wheel and put it into my world. And after a little bit of setup, it's going to go ahead and, well, it works. All my materials work, all my settings work. I have a water wheel brought in from Unreal Engine into UEFN. Now, one thing to keep in mind is these are just stacked meshes. There's no real way to interact with them or do anything inside of Fortnite itself. If you want to actually do something with them, we need to turn them into building props or building stacked meshes. We could do that inside of our content browser by right-clicking, choosing blueprint class, choosing if you want it to be a prop or a stacked mesh. In this case, we could do a prop. Props are interactive and standalone. I could name this whatever I'd like, using the F2 key to rename our asset. If I open up that building prop blueprint, we can find some basic settings inside of here. The important one being the stacked mesh that we wanted. In this case, we can see it's the water wheel. We can also change all the different settings, such as how you interact with it. And it's important to note, once you are in creative mode inside of Fortnite, stacked meshes can't be interacted with like other Fortnite props. You won't be able to use the device tool in order to pick them up and move them. That's why we need them to be props. Up until this point, we've been using the UE part of UEFN, but we haven't touched on the FN part. Let's go ahead and look at how we can playtest this project inside of Fortnite itself.
Let's see this.
So far, we've been looking at the UE part of UEFN and doing all of our work inside the editor. But let's take a look at the FN part and how we can test our project inside of Fortnite, as well as edit inside of Fortnite and have those changes.
The whole education
One important
in this
item or device inside of your project is going to be your island settings. If we scroll down into our outliner, we can find the island settings. This is going to match the island settings inside of the creative experience. One will come by default inside of your project, but if you happen to lose it, you can go ahead and go into the Fortnite folder, devices, and you can look for settings. And if you do, you can find the island settings device, and you can drag and drop a new one in. You want to make sure you only have one though, so I'm going to delete the extra one. Now for actually playtesting, we need to launch a editor session. At the top, we can click the launch session button, and it's going to go ahead and launch it. But I'd recommend going into the options menu to the right so we can look at some of the options. Live edit allows us to edit live. Basically, Fortnite Creative and our UEFN session will be connected, and changes we make in one will be reflected in the other immediately. Not everything supports this. Some changes you may have to push in order for the client to update. But a lot of basic things like moving objects do work, and it's really cool, and we're going to look at it in a second. The other one is auto starting the game. I'd recommend disabling this for now, since we're going to launch into the editor for testing purposes. But if this is on, instead of launching into edit mode, it's going to launch into play mode, so you can immediately start play testing. Let's go ahead and hit launch session and see what happens. After a short amount of time, it's going to check the project. It's going to validate it and then upload it to the servers. At this point, at the top, it says session loading, and it is loading up our session on the server side. And there we go. Depending on the size of our project and how many extra items we used, in my case, I had extra stack meshes that I imported. They weren't Fortnite props. It may take a little while, but once it's done, we can now see we have a session connected on the servers for our UEFN project here. We can push any changes if we've made any. In this case, we haven't, so it's a green check mark. And then we can open the game view, which is going to connect us to our Fortnite client. I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And our game view is going to go ahead and open up in the background. We can see after a little bit, it's going to load us up into our edit session, and we will be inside of our map using the settings that we set up. If you've used Fortnite Creative, this should look familiar because, well, you're in a creative island instance. We can run around like we'd expect to. We can look at any of the Fortnite props. For example, here's my player spawn pads. We can see they're editable. We can also see all of our custom content. And we'll notice, since I didn't turn them into props, they just simply exist in our world. We can't really interact with them. We can't move them. They just exist.
Oh, by the way,
we can also see the two lights that I have inside of my world. And we can see back inside of the editor, we can see the two lights that we set up earlier. And we can see that they matched inside of our Fortnite play session. This is just
Okay.
like Fortnite creative mode. If we want, we can go and start our game to playtest or go into your My Island. You'll notice these settings inside of here match the device settings inside of our editor. Now let's look at the cool live editing features. One of the issues so far is I moved this player spawn pad up. If we were to go back and look at our Fortnite map, we can see, yep, it's indeed up. We can fix it inside of Fortnite Creative. So for example, I could pull up my phone, I could cut the device, I could move it down to a different location and paste it. And going back into UEFN, we can now see that item has moved. And if we were to do the same thing, I can move the item inside of UEFN. If I was to move it up, for example, but I wanted it on the surface below me, I can push the End key on my keyboard and snap it right down. Going back into Fortnite Creative Mode, we can see it's moved and it's now snapped onto the ground. We can also do the same thing inside of Fortnite Creative. For example, if I open up my inventory, I can grab the Ruined Outpost. I can then put it inside of my world, let's say right here. Going back into UEFN, we can now see the item is inside of UEFN, ready to edit. And the nice thing is I can use the quick iteration tools inside of UEFN and move things around. Maybe I don't like this one item in that spot. I want it moved back. And I don't like this bench here or this trash can. I don't like the light. I actually want to rotate this. So I'll rotate it and move it into a different spot. I can now go back into creative mode. And all those changes are made and updated instantly. So that's the power of live editing. You can also collaborate with other people on your team. So you can have multiple people in the same session editing together. I'm going to go ahead and just simply hit start game so that way you can see it's actually working live for testing purposes. If we look in the background at the editor, we can see that it says end game, game in progress. It knows we are now inside of a game and we are doing something. Once we have a game in progress, we're no longer in edit mode and we can't make any changes live. They're not going to stick. They're not going to update between the Fortnite client and the UEFN client. We need to go ahead and end it. Either way, I'll end it, for example, in UEFN. You can see it says game is ending. Inside of UEFN, we have now ended. I can return back to the island, which will be edit mode. You can see in the background, it'll now say the session's connected, and we're back in edit mode. If you make a change that is not going to show up immediately, for example, if I go back into UEFN and I go into my marketplace, I'm going to grab another item out of my Wild West. Let's grab these candles and we'll drop them in next to our building. Once it's done cooking and adding this asset to our UEFN session, if we go back into Fortnite Creative, we'll notice it's not going to update. Because this is an additional asset that needs to be pushed to my client, we see a temporary placeholder, this little round sphere, and inside of UEFN itself, we have our push changes button that is going to say we have some changes that need to be made. In UEFN, we can see that it has push changes to refresh with this nice little box telling us, hey, there's some changes. And inside the editor, we need to push those changes. Once those changes are pushed, it'll go ahead and update the map in the Fortnite client, and then we'll now be back in sync. Once we're done inside of our Fortnite client, we can close it out. And back inside of UEFN, we can now see we no longer have a connected session. If we want to, we could launch session again and go right back into it. So far, we've been working in this nice flat blank map in order to learn the basics of the editor and working with content. Let's start looking at some of the different tools available to us.
Okay, now this is what I want,
landscaping
too.
Landscape mode.
And modeling, so we can like make a proper track. We can carve out a space which will work, you know? That's what we want. That's what we want.
Up until this point, we've been using the blank map and adding things to it. Let's go ahead and look at our landscape mode. Let's go to File, New Level. We're going to create a new level to put our landscape in. Choose the empty level and create it. And here we are inside of our new blank map. The first thing I'm going to do is save my map. I can go up to File, Save Current Level, and I'm going to call this our level. It's a good thing to save new assets after you create them, so that way the engine knows about them and you don't have to worry about redoing that work. Let's take a look at our landscape mode. In the top left, we have our modes drop down. Currently it's on selection. Let's change this to landscape. And here we have all the default settings. The important ones to keep note of is the material we'll be using, and then near the bottom is going to be the items that set up our size. All of this is covered in more detail in the documentation. For our purposes, let's just go ahead and hit create and use the default settings. Once our map has been created, I'm going to go ahead and look at it from a much higher perspective. we can see we have this nice big square map. Now we have a couple tools available to us. At the top, once we've created a landscape and we're in landscape mode, we have the manage options. This is where we could do things like create a new landscape or even remove pieces that we no longer need. Let's say this was too large. We can delete an edge, for example, and make our landscape smaller.
Yeah.
Under sculpting, we have the ability to sculpt our map.
Sculpt.
By default, we have the sculpt tool. We can also see we have a few different
Smooth
options
tool,
available
that's what I
to us.
need.
Control click raises, control shift click lowers. We can see my terrain is raising up where I'm clicking on it. And if I hold down the shift key instead, I'll lower in that area. Maybe we want to go ahead and flatten it. We can use the flatten tool, pick a piece of the ground where we want it to be flattened to that height, hold down the mouse, and now when I drag over the other areas, you'll see it flattens it to that height.
What? I need to learn this.
You'll see it flattens it to that height, that area. Maybe control click raises, control shift click lowers. We can see my terrain is raising up where I'm clicking on it. And if I hold down the shift, my terrain is control click raises, control shift click lowers. You can see my terrain is raising up when I'm clicking on it. And if I hold down the shift key instead, I'll lower in that area. Maybe we want to go ahead and flatten it. We can use the flatten tool, pick a piece of the ground where we want it to be flattened to that height, hold down the mouse, and now when I drag over the other areas, you'll see it flattens it to that height.
Okay.
Maybe I want to go ahead and raise up a little bit of hills. Then I'll use the flatten tool to pick the top peak, make a little bit of a flat area like this. Now it's a little too flat.
That's
Maybe
cool.
I could go into the erosion and erode the area around the edges, give it a little more smoother look as I drag my mouse around. You can also adjust the types of brushes, how strong it is, and a lot of other options to get your sculpting exactly how you want it. The last section is our painting section.
Pretty straightforward.
This is where we can choose our different landscape layers and then paint and change. For example, this one is
Jerksy, what's up? How's it going? We're learning the Unreal Engine, so you can make a map that we want to make.
A little bit of that texture showing up.
Red Cody, what's up? How's it going? How you doing? Welcome to the channel. We're learning.
And you can change, for example, your
very first time using the Unreal Editor. Need the tutorial.
Less annoying. If you wanted to, you could always reset a layer or erase a layer. For example, I can right-click on this layer and clear it. Now I could hit play so we could check this out in the editor. However, I don't have a player start since this is a new blank map. So let's go back into our content browser, into Fortnite. Now I could drill down and find where it's at, or I could just type in player. I hit escape so it closed. We can look through here, and now we have our player spawner. Drag it in. My player will now spawn here. Because I'm in the editor, I want to drag this down, but I can't. I'm in the landscape mode still.
Yeah, you gotta change it to selection
mode. Now I can select the items, and I won't mess with the landscape anymore. Use the N key to drag that to the ground.
Okay, this is interesting. Now we can make this.
Well, we have a warning. This warning is telling us that the map that we are using right now, the newly created one that we've called our level, is not our default map. You can only have one default map that loads up when you load your project.
Okay.
Do we want to use this map? We'll hit yes. Or do we want to use the other map? We hit no. I want to make this our new default map, so I want to say yes, use this. In addition, that map actually isn't loaded up into our project, so that way it uploads it, and that information is then available to us. So we need to add it to the game feature data. We'll hit yes as well. When we tried to launch our level, it let us know that this was not our default level, and that it needed to add the map data. If you need to do this by hand, you can open up your game feature data object, and if we scroll down under experience, you'll see your default map. In this case, because we only set it temporarily, it's still your first hour, so I'll change it over to our level. And if you need any data from any other maps, you would use it under the map data section here. You'd add an element and then select the map that you want to load up additionally. As of now, you can only have one primary map. We don't have the ability to load up, for example, level 1 and level 2 in the same project.
Yeah, I am.
And now that we've launched into Fortnite, we can see we have our spawn pad working. We have our nice little eroded hill that we can jump up onto, and we have the rest of our map working.
Well, this is so freaking cool. Like,
additionally,
it's
maybe
literally
isn't your strong point,
Okay.
You can always go into File, New Level, and there are a bunch of pre-made islands with landscapes set up for you that you can use for your project.
Yeah, I'm gonna.
With my landscape now set up,
Got
I want to
one
add a
thing
few
I want
props
to
to
do.
my level. However, there's no props inside of the content browser that I want that will meet my needs, and I don't have any pre-made anywhere. We can look at the modeling tools as a way to create our own basic props inside of the editor.
Yeah, let's do that. Up next, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. After this,
We want to
more
create a basic
tutorials to
barrel
go, and
to
then
add
we'll
into
start
our island experience,
and making
but we don't
some
have one
new
available inside
cool
of the
things.
editor or outside. Let's use the modeling tools to create one.
I
In
don't
our
know
mode
if
drop
anyone's
down in the
watching
top
this,
left,
but
let's change this to modeling.
are interested in this.
We now
But
have
if you
access
are,
to a
wait, come back in like 40 minutes. That'll be more interesting.
large amount of modeling tools on the left.
Or come back tomorrow when I'm actually playing Fortnite. I'm
Let's
just
go for the
creating
create
some
option
maps
under
today.
shapes, and let's create a cylinder. We can drag it into our level, and we can now see we can create a cylinder. When I click in the editor, it's now going to ask us to finalize our setting. In our settings on the left, I want to make this 150 for our height. I like the radius of 50. And let's bump our radial slices all the way to the top so it's nice and round. And we can see we have a nice round barrel shape. We have a few other options available to us. All of these are covered in the documentation, but the main ones I care about are the material, which we currently have set to none since we have no material, and then where we want to put it. And we'll go ahead and put it into the meshes folder, but you can choose the folder icon next to it to change that. Let's hit accept, and now we've created our cylinder. And let's find our cylinder in our meshes folder. And when we go into our meshes folder, we can't see it because we still have player in our search bar. We'll go ahead and remove it, and now we can see our saved mesh. I'm going to go ahead and rename this to something more appropriate, like SM_barrel.
This one is a little bit confusing.
Let's go ahead and make sure it's saved. Now, this
This
doesn't really look
modeling.
too much like a barrel. We can't put anything inside of it, so let's use some of our other tools. We have our Poly Edit tool. When we click on it, we can go to Poly Group Edit, and now we need to select what we want to edit. In this case, I'm going to choose the top.
Okay.
If we scroll up in our list, we can see we have a few different options for our faces. I'm going to choose Inset, and this will ask me how much to inset it. I'll choose something that looks pretty good, and I'll click, and I'll hit accept. And now I have what appears to be the outside of a barrel and a solid inside. This is good. Now let's work on the inside.
Delete the inside.
Go back to our Poly Edit. Make sure we click on our item so we can actually edit it. Poly Group Edit option. And this time we're going to extrude. We'll choose extrude, but it asks us for a face. We want to extrude the inside. Choose extrude again. And now we can see as I move my mouse up and down, it's extruding up and down.
Okay.
Well, this is good, but if I want it exact, we have a few options. One of them being the distance mode.
I don't think I'll need to model too much in
I know
this
I created
one.
my barrel 150 units high, so let's make this distance 130. But that's not quite what I want. It's in the wrong direction, so we'll make it negative 130. Now if we look inside of our barrel, we actually have what looks to be a barrel with an inside part that's empty. We'll hit accept, and now if we were to go back into selection mode, we can select our barrel and move it around, and we have a barrel. We have a nice, simple, basic barrel. And in the end, we have a new stack mesh using our basic modeling tools that we can then work on. Now, it looks very basic. It just has this checkerboard material on it. And if we click on it, we see we have a spot for a material, but we don't have a material for it. So let's look at creating a basic material to make our barrel look more barrel-like.
Okay, then.
Back inside our Fortnite session, we can see we have our 3 cylinders, but we need them to actually look a little bit better than just a grid. So how do we do that? What we need to do is we need to create a material and then apply it to our stack mesh. And looking at our stack mesh, we have a material slot. We need a material. In our meshes folder, let's go ahead and right-click on the background and choose New Material. Let's name this material_barrel, and we can double-click to open it up. Now, this is the basics of a material. We have some properties. It determines things like, is it meant for going on an item? Is it meant for post-process volume? On the right-hand side, we have the output or the result of this node. Everything that goes into this determines what we can see. We can start off with the basics of just a color. I'm going to hold down the 3 key on my keyboard and click with my mouse button, and this will create a constant with 3 inputs, red, green, and blue.
Yeah.
We can drag from the white, which is our red, green, and blue, and put it into base color. And if we double click on this black square, we now have a color picker. We can pick a color, maybe something like this pink, hit OK. And now we can see the output of our constant 3, or our color, is going into the input of the result, which is the output that we can actually see.
All right.
We have quite a few properties available to us depending on the type of material we're using. In our defaults here, you can see we don't have opacity or opacity mask because they're grayed out, and it's because we have opaque. If we were to change this to translucent, we can now plug in opacity. I'm going to change this back to opaque for now. I'm now going to hold down the 1 key on my keyboard and left click, and we'll get a single value. And in case you're wondering, yes, you can use 2 and 4 to have a 2 and a 4 value. We'll plug this single value 0 into metallic, and now this is saying this is not metallic at all. If we were to change this to 1, now we're saying this item's completely metallic.
That looks
and we can
good.
do the same thing with any of our other inputs. The documentation has more information on the exact properties, but what we care about is putting a texture or an image onto this material. I'm going to drag and select my nodes and delete them. I'm going to hold down the T key for texture and click, and I'll get a texture sample. I can drag from the RGB onto my base color, and now it's going to complain because I don't have anything inside of my texture sample. On the left-hand side under the details panel, we're going to find a texture we want to use. In my case, I want to use some log textures to make this a log barrel. I'm going to look for log, and we can see we have 3 of them. We're going to choose the D. D stands for diffuse, or the base color, or the color that we're going to use for this item. If we were to now save this material and let it compile, go back into our level, we can drag this directly onto the instances in the world, or we can open up our stack mesh barrel, and inside our stack mesh barrel, this is where we can change the default material for the stack mesh. I can look for barrel and click on it, and now by default, any new barrels I bring out into my world will have that material on it. We can also see that the other 2 barrels that I did not drag a material onto, like this item, have been updated because the base item has been updated. Now these don't look very good. It's just a simple wood log texture. Let's go back into our material, and we can look at the other 2 textures we saw and why they're named differently. Now if I wanted to, I could create 2 more texture nodes, or I could go back into my content browser, find those textures, and drag them and drop them in. I know they're in the Epic folder, we know they're called log, and we can find them here, the N and the ORM. I'm going to select both of them, drag them into my material, and drop them, and now I have 2 texture sample nodes. These textures have special naming by the artist so we know what they're used for. The one that ends in N is our normal map. We'll plug it into our normal map. The one that ends in ORM is a combined or a masked texture. O for ambient inclusion, R for roughness, M for metallic. So we would plug our R into ambient inclusion, the G into roughness, and the B into metallic. And now we have something looking a little more log-like with more detail. We go back into our level and we look at our item, and we can see we have this really cool looking wooden barrel. With our basic material set up, we do still have a little bit of an issue with our mesh here. And that's because our UVs, which is how our material determines where to put the textures on our mesh, are not exactly created correctly. We just use the defaults. The nice thing is I can go back into my modeling tools. I can look for the UV section. I can tell it to project UVs. I'm going to project them on a cylinder because, well, this is a cylinder, and hit accept. Going back into selection mode, we can now see I have my top not being as messed up as it was before. Now, I'm not an artist. This is just a quick and dirty attempt at getting something into the editor. Usually you would then take and have a proper version made by another artist. The next thing is, while we have 4 barrels here, I want to make them slightly different. If I go into my meshes folder, we have 1 material and 1 barrel. If I wanted to, I could create 4 different barrel meshes and 4 different materials, and then we could have 4 different looking items. Or we can use what's known as material instances. If we open up our material barrel, we can go to the top. I'm going to hold down 3 to add a color. I'm going to drag off of my output and type in multiply. I'm going to multiply the value or the color here with the color coming out of our texture, and then plug that into our base color.
What
You
the?
can now see it immediately goes black. Now that's not my desired result. I just haven't changed my color. We'll change this to white. What we want to do now is click on our color, right click on it, and convert it to a parameter. And we'll change this into tint. This is going to allow us to expose
That
this
looks
item
really
here, this
like a
parameter,
log. I mean,
to
a
a material
cylinder.
instance,
I mean, a
and then that will allow us
barrel.
to change it on a per instance basis. What that means is, let's save this out, go into our level, we'll right click on material barrel, and we'll choose create material instance. And we'll name this one blue. We can now drag this material instance onto one of our items, and we shouldn't see a difference. But if we click on it, we can now see we have that blue instance. Opening up the blue instance gives us a different look. This is our
It looks like an
instance
eye
editor.
right over
It
there.
allows us to change those properties. We can check on tint, and we can change our color to something more like a blue. We'll go ahead and save this, go back into our map, and now you can see we have a blue
That's
barrel.
blue.
Each of these items inside of our world are instances or different versions of our original item that we brought out. So by using a material instance, we can change individual values. So now at this point, I could create 2 more material instances, name them to different colors. For example, maybe a red and a green. Change them appropriately. And then drag those onto the individual barrels. And now we have 1 barrel, 1 stack mesh in our world that looks 4 different ways because we're using material instances to change them. One thing you might be asking is, how did I know the shortcuts for my nodes? We can click on palette in the right, and this is where we have access to all of our different nodes we can use. And you'll notice there are numbers or letters on the right. Those are our shortcut keys. Or we can right click anywhere in our background and we can search. This is how I found multiply, for example. Now that we have a basic barrel in our world and we've got them looking a little bit better, we have a nice material on it and we're using some material instances for coloring, let's give it a little more life. I want this to contain some fire and some smoke. So we're going to look at the Niagara VFX system to create
Niagara
those particle
Falls.
effects.
Got the Niagara Falls. My man, it's tiring work.
Now that we have a few barrels in our world, let's go and add some visual effects to them to give them a little more life. Now we could use the VFX spawner device inside of Fortnite. However, we want to use something more custom. So we're going to use the Niagara VFX system. Let's go ahead and create our own folder. We'll call it VFX. Inside of here, in the content browser, we're going to right click, go to FX, and we have 2 options. Niagara Emitter and Niagara System.
Niagara
systems are the container.
You're Canadian? I am Canadian.
And our emitters are what
I'm not
see
Canadian.
visually inside of our world.
How do you know I'm Canadian? I'm from New Zealand, but I live in Canada, so what says I'm Canadian?
Let's create a new Niagara system. It's going to ask us how we want to create it. We can create an empty one, copying it.
Please don't say my voice. Please don't say my voice. Please don't say my voice.
Existing one, or create them from a template or other emitters. I'm going to choose the first option.
Wait, Niagara. This is Niagara. We gotta go back.
Now we could use the VFX spawner device inside of Fortnite.
How are you doing, bro?
However,
Having a great day, by the way. Also, welcome to the channel.
The Niagara VFX system. Let's go ahead and create our own folder. We'll call it VFX. Inside of here, in the content browser, we're going to right-click, go to FX, and we have 2 options: Niagara Emitter and Niagara System. Niagara Systems are the container, and they hold emitters, and our emitters are what we see visually inside of our world. Let's create a new Niagara system. It's going to ask us how we want to create it. We can create an empty one, copy an existing one.
No, this is in Unreal Engine, there's a Niagara that is
Create
like
that
a
from
system. It's like a system that helps you create things now. It's like Niagara Falls. That's in Canada.
a temp.
But I mean, I was so confused how you knew I was. I'm living in Canada at least. I'm not Canadian. I'm from New Zealand, but I'm living in Canada. So I was like, how is this possible?
Or
How did you know?
other emitters. I'm going to choose the first option, new system.
How's it going,
select
folk?
emitters,
Having a great day?
hit next. If
Let's
you
do
don't see
this.
all of your options, go ahead and hit show all at the top. We're going to go to parent emitters.
We're right now just like learning how to use Unreal Editor so we can make some maps. I got a map in mind to do.
We can add multiple emitters at this point, but we're going to add it later.
Might be boring right now, but it will soon be
good. We're going to name this FX Smoke, and we'll double click to open it. This is our Niagara system editor. We can see a preview in the top left, some parameters.
Victor, what's up? How's it going? How you doing?
We have our actual overview. We have a
it's been a while.
Setup. This blue one is the parent. It controls all the main control settings. And then the red ones themselves are the individual emitters. Here we can see I have a smoke sprite, and it's emitting smoke. If we want, we can go ahead and save this out, go back into our level, drag the system into the world, and we can see it's now emitting smoke. I'm excited to
like create new maps in Fortnite, and it's a Saturday. I'm also very tired, but it's good.
We have our timeline, and we can see every second and a half it's repeating. The preview is going to repeat down here in our timeline. By clicking on the emitter without anything selected, we get access to all of our individual sections. We can enable or
this is what my like. There's all of these are videos of like 11 minutes. Two of them were 3 minutes long. It's been like an hour of the stream. UE so hard. I've tried it. I know, but I want to learn it so I can like create some maps like on stream and like make videos of it. But
disable them as needed.
It's like I'm just like diving right in, and it's like so far it's.
No longer want to scale it by color. We can disable it.
I understand the basics of it, but like I'm gonna need to go like 5 times, watch this tutorial like 5 times for me to like fully get it. Infinite. You know.
Now we'll go ahead and save it, and go back into our level, and we can see it's looping infinitely. Now inside of our viewport, we can see this is a bit big for what I want. And inside of our Niagara editor, we have a section called Initialize Particle. This is where it sets up the particle when it first spawns it in. You can see it's under the spawn section. And part of this is the size. So our sprite is always going to be 350 units large. Let's change this down to something smaller, maybe 100. And we'll go ahead and save it and look at our level. And we get something a little more appropriate for what I want.
Okay, that's cool.
Adjustment, we can see I now have some smoke coming out of the top of my barrel, and I think the size looks good. Now I want to add a little bit of fire. I could go ahead and create a second system with a fire emitter in it and use 2 of them.
Can you guys hear it? Like good, like it's really like you guys can hear its voice good and everything you can see.
Or another option is I can add another emitter directly into my system. I can right click in the background and choose to add an emitter. I'm going to add an emitter, and it gives me the same basic setup as before. This time I want my fire sprites sub UV. And now we can see we have a second emitter in here. I'll organize it a little better. We can individually isolate them if we wanted to. Like, for example, I'm going to need to do this
for when I'm going to make like
I can only see the fire
smoke for the F1 map I'm going to make.
In this case, my fire is a bit big, but we've already seen how to change this. So we'll look at initialize particle, and we'll see that our sizes are between 20 and 65. However, there is another one here called shape location. Basically, this is a shape, a sphere in this case, with a size of 100 that our fire is going to be created inside of. Let's lower this radius down to maybe 50. And now we can see our fire is much closer to our smoke. I'm going to go with maybe a 25. And now my fire seems to be smaller than my smoke. I'm going to go ahead and save this, go back into our level, and now I have a little bit of fire and smoke inside my barrel. A nice tip, we can't really see it very well with this widget in front of it. We can push the G key, and now all of our widgets in our world will be hidden inside of our viewport. And if we want to, we could use the G key to bring it back, or we can go ahead and turn off game view. Now that we have our effects set up in a basic system, It isn't looking quite like I want it because of the fact that, one, there's no lighting attached to it, so it's just this plain color. And two, it's separate from my barrel. Let's go ahead and look at adding lighting to my effect and then combining this all into one reusable prop.
This is getting complicated. We haven't even got into the top part, which is the sequencer. Then,
Inside of my
which
level,
I've
I now
heard
have
is not as
barrels,
hard.
and one of them has a little bit of fire and smoke in it. Now the other three do not, because they're all individual instances. And I also have no lighting to make that fire come to life a little bit more. So let's look at fixing both of them now. Starting with lighting, you have the ability to use the lighting that comes with Fortnite, or we can use the lighting available to us inside of the Unreal Editor. In our Create menu at the top, we can go down to Lights, and we have access to a few different light types.
Okay.
We're going to use the point light by dragging and dropping it where we want it, in this case inside of my barrel.
Right,
and now we can
cool.
see our barrel has a nice little glow inside of it. Like other items inside of our editor, we have access to the details. Let's adjust our color to be a little bit more like a fire. We'll look for something more like an orange. Or we can use the eyedropper and mouse it over something like this fire effect over here and try to find a little bit of fire. We get a nice little dark orange red. And if we wanted to, we could choose the light again and adjust other items such as the intensity to make it a bit brighter, and other options available to us, including light functions, where we could create a material that would simulate a flickering effect. For our purposes, though, we're going to use this basic light setup. The nice thing about lights is they have no physical presence, so you can use them to decorate anything you want in the world as needed. And there are, again, a few other types, such as a directional light, which kind of simulates a sun, a spotlight, a rect light, and then your general skylight. The skylight and the directional light are useful if you're not using the built-in time of day system. Let's go ahead and turn these items into reusable props so that way we don't have to have 4 barrels with 4 lights and 4 VFX systems. In our content folder, let's make a new folder, and we'll call this one Props. Inside of our Props folder, we'll right-click, we'll go up to Blueprint class, and we have 2 of them available to us. A building stack mesh and a building prop. Since I don't really plan on doing any interaction with this, we'll just make this a building stack mesh. We'll call this one prop barrel, and we'll go ahead and double click to open it up. Inside of our prop barrel, we have a few different settings. On the parent itself, where it says prop barrel itself,
what am I
watching?
Stack
mesh. Let's set this
so much things.
Since we set up the material on our barrel, we now have our material set up, so we are good there. Let's go ahead and add in our light and our VFX. We'll go to Add Component on the top left, and we'll put a point light in. Let's go ahead and move our point light to where we have our light working like we want it, and adjust our color, and adjust our intensity so it looks like what I would like to see. Let's go and add another one. We're going to add the Niagara emitter system. Niagara particle system component is here. Right now you can see it's a child of our light. So if we were to move the light, the VFX system would move. I actually want to flip that. So we'll drag the Niagara up onto our stack mesh component. So it's now a child of the stack mesh. And then I'll move the point light down under the Niagara component. So now whenever we move the Niagara component, the light will move with it. The only issue right now is the light's already been moved. You can see it's off by 100. If we were to move our Niagara up, for example, the light moves with it. We can go back into the point light and reset it to the default. And now the Niagara and the light are in the same position. Let's go to our Niagara system asset. We call this one FX Smoke. And now we have a light and a smoke effect. We can adjust where we want this to be and where we want it to come out. Let's go ahead and save this and compile it. Go back into our level. Now our prop barrel is not in our world yet. We could drag it in, and now we have our prop barrel set up. But our issue is, what do we do with our existing barrels? We don't want to go in and delete them and then have to put them in the right place. Well, we can replace. Let's go and get rid of the light and the FX system that we put into our world, so we just have our barrels. We'll select all of our barrels. We'll make sure the prop barrel is selected in our content browser. We'll right-click in the viewport, choose Replace Selected Actors With, and then choose our prop barrel. And now we've gone and replaced those 4 individual items with the prop barrel itself. They did replace them so they are the generic barrel now. They do all look the same. They don't have the individual colors, but you could make new prop barrels with the different colors, Or you could set up your prop barrel so it will set that color based on a setting. Right now, if we were to look at our world, we have a fixed look. We have our barrels looking a certain way, our environment looks a certain way. We have a stylized look, but it may not be what we want. Using a post-process volume, we can actually change the way our world looks, and we're going to look at those next.
Yeah, let's go.
Let's go ahead and take a look
See how this
at our
goes.
post-processing
Oh my
volume.
god,
So we can
I
change
barely
the way
remember
our
anything.
world looks overall.
Mind is
Using the
mud.
Create menu on our toolbar, we can go to Visual Effects, Post-Process Volume. And by default, this isn't going to do anything. It's this small little blocky area that only has an effect when we're inside of it. If we were to go inside of it, for example, well, nothing's going to happen because we haven't set up our volume at all. Inside the post-process volume properties, which we can see in the details panel, we can adjust things such as exposure, bloom. We could even do some coloring effects and change the way our temperature and our global colors look. I could, for example, go under color grading global, go to our saturation and enable it. And by adjusting it, we can see our saturation is either blown out or brought back down to nothing. But if we were to move outside of this volume, it goes back to normal. So these are handy when you need certain areas to have different effects. But if you want the entire world to be changed,
What?
in our post-process volume, if we scroll to the bottom, or we look for unbound and we check that, it'll now affect everything in our world, not just the volume itself. So we went ahead and we adjusted this one individual setting in here, the saturation. Take a look at our
Let me just see this. I need to see this again.
where we can change the way our world looks overall. Using the Create menu on our toolbar, we can go to Visual Effects, go to our set. So these are handy when you need certain areas of the world to be changed. In our post-process volume, if we scroll to the bottom, so we went ahead and
I can make like a nighttime races,
and the documentation has coverage on them. That's usable inside of our side of it. So let's open it up. Did it materials, and using material magic, you can have any effect you want that's usable inside of our material setup. I'm going to go ahead and make a new folder in my content called materials. Inside of our material folders, I'll right click and create a new material, and we'll call this material post-process. Now, if I wanted to go into my post-process materials panel, add a new item, choose an asset reference, and then look for that post-process material. Once we've selected it, nothing's going to happen. That's because our material has nothing inside of it, so let's open it up. The post-process material is a special material under our material domain. Our default is our surface, so it goes on the surface of, say, our stacked meshes. But post-process has special passes and special features. Change our domain to post-process, and you'll now notice our output only has a emissive color. If we were to save this and go back into our level, it's now black. We're not doing anything but covering it with the solid black. We have nothing in our output. If we were to right-click and look for Scene Texture and choose it, we have access to a node that's going to give us properties from our scene. And one of them is going to be the post-process input. If we were to take the post-process input 0, take the color pin and connect it to the emissive color, and save, now we're going to get everything back to like we expected. So this takes our post-process input, adjusts it, and then outputs back out. So everything we see in our world, we can then output back out. But that means we can then adjust it. So if we drag off of our color, and for example type in desaturate, we have desaturation. We'll then hook the output node of desaturation into emissive color. You notice our preview is now desaturated. If we were to save this and go back into our level, we've now desaturated the entire level. But we're doing this using the post-process material and not a setting in the post-process volume like we did before. But this also gives us the ability to change things. For example, we could change it where it's only desaturated at a certain depth away from us, or we could give outlines to other objects. There is documentation with examples. We can see that the post-processing system can be very powerful to change the overall look, as well as having the ability to turn that look on and off at runtime.
Okay, sequencer, we got 3 more. We got 3 more to go.
We're going to take a look at the sequencer tool. It allows us to basically change any properties over time. Properties are things like, for example, on our post-process volume, we have the different colors, saturation effects, and how strong it is. Or maybe in the case of our barrel, whether or not it exists, the color of the light, and if our special effects is on. It also includes things such as our location, rotation, and scaling. What we're going to do is take our post-process volume and slowly desaturate our scene. So rather than going on or off, we're going to do it over 2 seconds. Inside of our content folder, I'm going to make a new folder called Sequences. Inside of our Sequences folder, I can right-click in the content browser, go to Cinematics, Level Sequence.
I'll see.
And I'm going to call this Sequence Saturate. We can double-click to open up the sequence editor. It may dock down at the bottom. If not, you can dock it wherever you'd like. If you've used a non-linear sequence, and I'm going to call this Sequence Saturate. We can double-click to open up the sequence editor. It may dock down at the bottom. If not, you can dock it wherever you'd like. If you've used a non-linear editing software before, this may look familiar. We have some tracks on the left, which are the items we're going to be working with, and on the right is our timeline. And along the top on our toolbar are all of our settings. We need to add the post-process volume because that's what we're going to be working with. We can select the post-process volume in the world, add the track, select Actor to Sequencer, and add a post-process volume. That's the one that we have selected. Or we can find it in our list, or we can drag and drop it right in. You'll also notice there is additional items we can add to our track, such as the ability to create a cinematic using a custom camera. Maybe we're going to sweep through the level or something else like that. Inside of our post-process volume, we want to adjust the value of our saturation in our color grading. If we scroll down, we can find color grading. We have a global section, and we have a saturation section. Right now, it's currently disabled. I also want you to make sure that you remove your material post-process that we added to this if you're going to do this, because they will conflict. We're going to adjust the saturation built in to the post-process volume. Now at this point, we can use the keyframe button on the right to add these properties. So our saturation, for example, could be added directly, or we can click on the Add Track button to the right of the item, find what we want. For example, this is a transform. Not really useful for post-process, but maybe if you wanted to move the barrel. But we have settings, color grading global, saturation. Now right now it's set to 1, so everything is set up to be colorful. We need to add keyframes where we want to start our value and where we want to change our value. You can think of keyframes as points of time holding certain values, and over that time, we will adjust it. We have auto keyframe turning on. That means whenever something is changed, it'll go ahead and pick up the change. But we need at least one keyframe to start with. At 0 seconds on our timeline, we'll go and add a keyframe. It's at the value of 1.
And that's just like normal
and what
editing.
we want to do now is drag out our bar to 60 or 60 frame. When we're running 30 frames per second, our 60th frame is going to be 2 seconds long. And then now that we have it keyframed, we can adjust this value. I'm going to adjust it down to 0. So now at 2 seconds, it's going to be 0. And you'll notice our values on the left will adjust. So it's going to go from full color to desaturated over 2 seconds. But you'll notice we can't see it in the preview, and that's because we don't have infinite turned on. We'll turn back on infinite, and now as you scrub through our timeline, you'll see it working.
Okay, I see.
One thing to keep in mind, when we're in the sequencer, it's going to have those sequencer effects applied to our viewport. If we were to close our sequencer so it's no longer open, those effects will no longer be applying to our scene. Opening back up our sequencer, we can drag our red bar over to 60, so that way our sequence will be exactly 60 frames. We'll save this and we'll close it out. Now we need to actually play this inside of our project. We can drag it, and no, we can't. We can't actually apply a sequencer directly inside of UEFN. We need a cinematic sequencer device. If we go into the Fortnite folder, under Devices, we can look for Cinematic, and we can find the cinematic sequencer device. I'll drag this, drop this into my world. It's going to ask me which sequence to play. We only have one, our saturate. I don't want it to autoplay. and I don't want any of our settings changed. We want this to play when I trigger it. We're going to walk up to our barrels. The player will walk over trigger, and then we'll go ahead and play this. So we're going to need a trigger. Let's look for trigger. We have our trigger device. I'll drag this in, put it in front of our third barrel. Our trigger device has a trigger event that we need to hook up to our cinematic device. Under user options functions, we want our cinematic device to play when the trigger calls on trigger. We'll select the trigger, or we could use the eyedropper to choose it in the world. And then the function we want to call is on triggered. It's going to go ahead and play now when the trigger is triggered. Now, before we go ahead and hit play to test this out inside of Fortnite,
I'm getting
here's
this
something
a
you
little
may
bit.
run into. Inside of Fortnite, if we were to attempt to start the game, our start game button is missing. And if we go into my island, you notice it tells us there's no settings available. We don't have a settings device. Since we started this project map from an empty template,
And
we
you're
didn't
still
have
not
an island
done.
device set
Yeah,
up for us
there's a lot of
automatically.
things. We're on like
So
the
inside of your
second
devices
last
folder, there's an
thing
island
to
settings
be
device. You can
to
drag
be
that and drop that
watched.
into your world. And when you go back into Fortnite, you'll find you now have
Got
the
like
ability to start the game.
10
Your
to
settings are
20
back.
minutes of
Once
it,
our session has been
maybe less.
updated and our changes have been put into place, let's go ahead and start the game and test and make sure our cinematic device is working, and we get the nice desaturation effect over 2 seconds.
Let's do this.
And you can see the cinematic played, and we have our nice effect. Level sequences can be used for more than just keyframing actions, events, and properties inside of our world. We can actually use it to create or modify.
Hey, you actually did come in exactly 1 hour.
UEFN and introduce our own animations into our
actually,
projects.
so it's been less than 1 hour.
We're going to take a look
Okay,
at
we got 5 minutes, and then let's see. 6 minutes, pro gamer.
We're going to take a look at skeletal animation and how we can use the sequencer system in order to create our own inside of the editor. You'll notice this map looks different. I've created a file, new project, using one of the feature examples. It's the Animation 101.
Yeah.
This is a great project if you want to learn how the cinematic sequence device and animated meshes work inside of UEFN.
I would.
And I'm going to use this for my example because it has a skeletal mesh that we can use. If we go into our animation content folder, under meshes, we can find our Fortnite mannequin. We can actually see the Fortnite mannequin sitting here by itself, ready to play back an animation. Let's animate a new animation using that skeletal mesh. I'm going to drag it into our world and drop it.
I can make some shorts of this.
And we can use a level sequence in order to create a control rig so we can animate the bones similar to the way we animated keyframes for our post-process file. I'm going to right-click in our browser, cinematic, level sequence. I'll call this sequence animation, and we'll open it up by double-clicking. Let's add that actor into our sequencer by going to Actor to Sequencer, add Fortnite Mannequin, since I haven't selected. And now we need to make that control rig setting. We could right-click on our Fortnite Mannequin track, go up to Edit with FK Control Rig, and it's going to ask us what we want to do in order to create a control rig.
This is so fun. Now
we have two main options that I care about here. Reducing keys true or false. If it's set to false, it's going to bring in our mannequin, and we're going to have a key for every single point inside of our timeline.
Yeah.
Now, if we wanted to, we could select all those keys and delete them. And now we have a basic blank control rig without anything keyed out. Or we can go back in. We'll go ahead and edit with FK control rig again. Choose reduce keys. Since this mannequin is going to be doing my animation from this position, and I want to return to this position, this worked out nicely because now we have a starting keyframe and an ending keyframe in this neutral position. You'll also notice the animation mode opened up in the top left. This is where we have the ability to change some options for our control rig. You can refer to documentation for more about that. But for our purposes, we just need the ability to have our hierarchy for our skeleton shown. I'm going to go ahead and click on one of the shoulders. I'm going to make sure I have the actual upper arm bone selected and not one of the twists. Let's move this over. We'll rotate the arm a little bit. Because we have auto keyframe turned on, it added that keyframe, and now we have a little bit motion. We'll move it a little more to another spot. You'll notice it's automatically trying to go back now because we have the final resting keyframe at the end. So let's say another 80 frames. We'll move this up a little bit. I'm going to now try to find the elbow. We can see here lower arm R2. We'll rotate a little bit. I also want to move that upper arm a little bit more.
Oh, that's gonna be hard.
Set the
Oh
upper
no,
arm
it's gonna
again.
take a long time.
Rotate it a bit more like this. We now have a little basic animation saluting. Maybe we want to pause for a little bit before we go back down. We can select our keyframes, copy them with Control C, move to where we want, paste them with Control V. Now we can see it goes up, it hangs for a little bit, and then it's going to go back down. And it'll repeat this as needed. I'm happy with this. I'm going to save my sequencer. We're going to go back up to our top.
I do remember.
Find our Fortnite mannequin in our
I mean, I'm gonna have to go back like 5
and
times
make it
of
an
all the
animation
tutorials to remember it.
Are the
But
animations
for like the gist of it,
back
I think
on our
I get the gist of
I'm
it.
going to put it in the animations folder.
And I
I'm
don't
going to call this
need most of it for
Manny,
the video
because this is
for
the
I mean for the
mannequin
game I'm gonna
And
make
once it's
for
been
right
created,
now.
we can close our sequencer. We don't need it anymore.
But it's good to
We'll go back
know
into our
like for
animations
the future.
folder, and now we
Because
can
now
see
I'm
we have
like
Wave Manny.
can make some animations and make it for
animations for this mannequin
some
that can be played
shorts.
back. But the one we care about is Wave Manny. If we open it up, we can see we have our little wave. We already have a mannequin set up right when we start this little example that has an animation to play waiting for it. So let's drag our mannequin wave in. So this way, when we load up this map for testing purposes in a second, it's going to go ahead and play back that wave. Now, if you want to have your own devices set up in order to do this, we're looking for the animated device. We can go back under Fortnite devices. Let's look for animated. And we can find the animated mesh device. If we were to put this into our world, it's going to ask us what skeletal mesh we want to play back, maybe what animation we want to play back. For example, here is this emote. And then you have other options such as if it's looping, how it plays back, and the ability to trigger it like any other device. For our purposes, though, we're simply going to use the Fortnite skeletal mesh just to play back this animation. Let's go ahead and launch our session. And inside of our Fortnite edit session, we can see this fun little animation playing back on our skeletal mesh.
How do we make it not a skeletal mesh? That's the question.
And with that, that's going to cover the basics of UEFN. There's, of course, more that we can cover and look at, and we're going to wrap up with some more information and where to go from here.
Yeah, let's do this.
And with that, we're going to wrap up our first hour with UEFN.
That's it.
So what did we look at in this course? We went ahead and started out, looked at the editor and how we can work with content, as well as playtest that new content. Then we started looking at some of the unique features of using UEFN, such as the landscaping tools, modeling tools, the ability to create your own custom materials, add your own visual effects using Niagara, custom lighting, post-processing effects, and then using Sequencer to animate properties on items as well as create your own skeletal animation. Now, where do we go from here? I'd recommend going to the Epic Developer Community site in the new Fortnite section. We have some great getting started documentation as well as more videos. We have the full documentation for UEFN available as well on that site. And don't forget, since you are working in creative mode, a lot of the creative documentation, which is available there as well, will apply to this same process. When you visit the EDC, don't forget to check out the Learning section, where you can find great content from both Epic Games as well as the community. We have some great community-driven content. And the forums. Don't forget the forums. You can go there, talk with other people who are using UEFN and creative, and get started on making your included with UEFN. We touched upon one of them, Animation 101, but there are others, and there are more coming all the time. They're great.
Alright, cool. Okay, we finished this. Now, let's go and make some stuff. Right. Okay, done. And now let's change do this. Okay, cool. Cool. Now, after a long while, we're here. Yeah, we need the arid island. Let's make it. I think this would work well. Okay, wait. I need to just put my full face cam just for a second. Projects. F1 map 01. That's just that. What? Oh, it's such a space. Okay. Rename. Oh, wait. There we go. There we go. We're here. Finally got it. Jackson, what's up? Sorry, I've been busy trying to set up this UEFN and I didn't see the chat, but how are you doing? Welcome to the channel. We're doing our first creative map. It's gonna be hard to learn, but we're gonna try. And I will create soon the map. Prepare shaders. And we're loading in. Let's go. Let's put some music on while we wait. I wonder if it will be too much for my PC. Wonderful. Yeah. Okay, I mean, it has this. Okay. Wait, I need to turn down the settings. Alright, well, my computer is about. Alright, that's slow. We gotta go faster. Alright, cool. Okay, so we are here in Fortnite. Let's see if we can like. Okay, we need to like create a whole baseline. So see here. Okay, we got a whole thing. So I think like we're gonna do like a whole like we need to figure out how this map layout is. Perspective top. Let's see. What the? Sure. Lit. Alright. Okay, so we got okay. If I just like this is so confusing already. Okay, this like to come up with a good racetrack, you need like a good. Okay, I think. And then you go this way. Okay. Okay, so it definitely starts here. Okay. Okay. Alright, see, so start up here. Okay, let's see. Where's the sculpting? Landscape. This is the yeah, let's see how big brush size. Yeah, what the? Okay, well, Manuela, if I just close. What the heck? How did we just get a lot of people right when my freaking my freaking UEFN just crashed because freaking hell? Okay, I think I did a little bit too much. Just do it to like low quality, and then we can like create the maps. But how's it going? What the hell? How do I have 8 people watching? But welcome to the channel, all of you. While we wait for it to load again. Okay, let's put on some music. Musica. How you guys doing? Oh shoot. Whoopsies. That's not good music. Not good music. Okay, we're back. We're back. Okay, I'll do it. Alright, let's go back to that. Let's go back to that and get the continue creating some good maps. Let's go back to it. Go to 6. Where's the? I think this is where I went. I got up. Yeah, E. Okay. Alright, cool. Okay, that. Nope. What the hell? This. Why is it saying access violation or something like that? That's not even what I need right now. Oh my god, I gotta fix this. Okay, we're loading it again and seeing why, because I put it to all low settings so it should not crash. I don't even understand why it would crash. Makes no sense. Except one sense. My computer's a trash heap. Okay, we're back again. Open. Okay, can we open it, please? Can we open it, please? So it can work, please? Okay, thank you. Alright. Should we try again on this one, or should we just like say, nah, let's not risk it? Oh, let's risk it. Whatever. Turn that off. I've turned everything off. It's just me, you, and I. Let's see, where's the surface that I started on? This one. Okay. Alright. Okay, I see this. Okay, I see how we're gonna do this. We're gonna start off with this. Where's the selection mode landscape? Try it again. Okay, I'm done. I'm done with this. I'm done with this. So let's play some. I'm gonna try and fix it off stream, and I'll come back tomorrow for a longer stream. But I hope you guys all enjoyed me not doing anything. But yeah, I'll be playing with people tomorrow. It's gonna be fun. And yeah, let's go. I hope you guys enjoyed the stream. Be sure to hit that like button and subscribe, share. Maybe I'll come later in the night. And yeah.